President-elect Trump announces more cabinet picks for his incoming administration. This as his vice president-elect prepares to meet with key Republican senators on Capitol Hill with some of Trump's more controversial choices.
The president-elect has made it clear that he wants to push through his cabinet picks, regardless of how controversial they may be.
Gates already had quite an uphill battle because he is, frankly, one of the most disliked men on Capitol Hill.
Prosecutors in President-elect Donald Trump's New York hush money case are arguing his conviction should not be dismissed.
This is unprecedented. We've never had a former president of the United States who's convicted of felonies. We've never had that person then be elected to be once again the president.
It's an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to continue to serve in the position as House Democratic leader.
CBS News can confirm that these long-range ATACMS have been used on Russian targets on Russian soil.
And the whole point of these test flights is to demonstrate reliability. They're really going to have to launch a lot of these, and I'm talking dozens, if not more, before they'll develop the reliability to put people on board.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We begin our report with President-elect Donald Trump working to secure his cabinet in spite of the controversies plaguing some of his top picks. The president is in Brownsville, Texas, Tuesday to observe the test launch of SpaceX's Super Heavy Starship rocket. The visit highlights his recently budding friendship with the company's CEO, Elon Musk. And while Trump visits the Lone Star State, we've learned more about what he wants in his next administration and who. Trump has chosen celebrity heart surgeon Dr. Mehmet Oz to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Oz unsuccessfully ran for Pennsylvania's Senate seat in 2022. He's also been criticized for promoting questionable dietary and health supplements on his daytime talk show. Trump has also made his choice for Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, the billionaire CEO of a Wall Street investment firm. If confirmed as Commerce Secretary, Lutnick will be tasked with imposing trade policy, including Trump's proposed tariffs on foreign goods. The department plays a key role in expanding U.S. manufacturing by investing in American businesses. It releases regular economic data, including inflation numbers, and it's home to the Census Bureau and National Weather Service. Lutnick is considered one of Trump's least controversial picks. Several other cabinet selections have raised eyebrows among the lawmakers who will give final approval, Senate Republicans. Vice President-elect and current Ohio Senator J.D. Vance will bring some of Trump's cabinet picks to Capitol Hill this week in an apparent attempt to shore up support among his colleagues. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Attorney General pick Matt Gaetz are set to meet Wednesday and Thursday with GOP lawmakers. Hegseth and Gaetz have faced scrutiny over sexual misconduct allegations against them, including calls from lawmakers in both parties to release a House ethics report specifically into Gaetz' alleged misconduct. Both men deny any wrongdoing. Nicholas Wu joins me now. He's a congressional reporter for Politico. Nicholas, good to see you. What more do we know about these planned meetings?
Well, what we're seeing right now is the start of the transition process and the nomination process for these more controversial nominees before the Trump administration is even sworn on into office. They're really hitting the ground running. The question is just how exactly these nominees will fare in these closed-door meetings. Of course, Vance is a very familiar face to a lot of senators. And Gaetz, it is very much a lightning rod on Capitol Hill. But, he is someone who they know.
Where do things stand right now with that House Ethics Committee report?
The House Ethics Committee, which we have to remember is evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans, is set to meet tomorrow. And what could happen there is that they could vote to release this report, or they could punt this or find some other way to release their findings to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The question is just whether a Republican member of that panel will cross over to join Democrats if such a vote comes up, because we're expecting all Democrats to vote in favor of release if that vote is teed up. And of course, the way the math goes, it would only take one Republican.
Democrats have re-elected Hakeem Jeffries to serve as House Minority Leader. Let's go ahead and listen to some of this.
Despite the claims of some of my Republican colleagues who have spent a lot of time over the last 2 weeks talking about some big, massive mandate, I'm looking for it. That doesn't mean that we don't have to make adjustments to make sure that we can get beyond fighting House Republicans with a national wave on top of us to a draw. But the question about this notion of some mandate to make massive far-right extreme policy changes, it doesn't exist.
It's interesting. We've been hearing that a lot from many lawmakers and Trump himself of this mandate given by the American people. What will Jeffries' task be with the incoming Congress?
The test for Jeffries is going to be how to steer his party through the minority and when they try to find bipartisan deals, if they do exist, while also protect all of the vulnerable purple district lawmakers in his caucus. There's lots of different competing demands here. This is only his second term as the House Minority Leader. But it'll be his first one under Trump. And so a question for him is going to be how he'll handle his relationship with Trump and Democratic lawmakers. Remember, years back, Pelosi was very much a foil to Trump. She was the face of the anti-Trump resistance. It's a question now of how Jeffries chooses to play that relationship.
Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace from South Carolina introduced a resolution to ban transgender women from using women's restrooms in the Capitol. She said it was, quote, absolutely a response to the election of Democrat Sarah McBride, who will be the first openly transgender person in Congress.
So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way. I'm working on legislation that would ban it on federal property. I'm working on legislation if you are a school that is funded by the federal government. This shouldn't go on.
McBride called the resolution a, quote, blatant attempt from far right-wing extremists to distract from the fact that they have no real solutions to what Americans are facing. Does Mace have support for this?
That remains to be seen. Speaker Mike Johnson has been non-committal on what he'll actually do with this legislation. Republicans are putting together this rules package that will govern how the House operates for the next year, and for the next Congress, and Mace has indicated she wants to try to insert it into that. But Johnson said today that although basically he wanted to try to treat people with dignity and to try to make accommodations for folks. So we'll see how he handles this particular provision.
Okay, Nicholas Wu, thank you.
Thank you.
Prosecutors in President-elect Trump's New York City criminal case say his sentencing could be postponed. After Trump's election victory, Judge Juan Merchan asked District Attorney Alvin Bragg how he wanted to proceed with the case. Considering we're in uncharted territory, this is the first time in U.S. history a convicted felon was elected president. In a court filing Tuesday, the DA's office wrote, it will oppose any effort by Trump's team to dismiss the case, but conceded the possibility of delaying the November 26th sentencing until 2029, when Trump's second term in office ends. CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Royfe joins me now. So, Rebecca, are you surprised at all by what was in the prosecutor's filing?
Lindsay, thanks for having me here. I was not surprised, and I think a couple of important things to note here is that once he assumes office, he'll be able to make those federal cases go away. But this case is different in two important ways. One, it is a state prosecutor, and two, there has already been a jury verdict. So what Judge Merchan has to do here is balance the weight of a jury verdict, and a jury plays a very important role in our criminal justice system, with the need to ensure a smooth transition. So what the district attorney did here was offer one possible resolution, which is instead of dismissing this case, which would be a slap in the face to the jury that had done all this work, this would be a possible compromise where they could put off the sentencing so it had no possibility of interfering with the president-elect's ability to ensure that this is a smooth transition.
So the sentencing was scheduled for November 26th. Are we thinking that's going to hold? What happens next?
So now the judge has to make his own decision here. So there have been possibilities put on the table. The president's attorneys are certainly going to fight for dismissal. My guess is that this is a judge with strong respect for the jury system, who has conducted this trial in a fairly, important and dignified way, and will not throw the case out, but will rather either take up the district attorney's offer or go forward with the sentencing and just stay the implementation of that sentence, which is another option that could go forward.
And Trump and his attorneys are still trying to have the case dismissed based on the Supreme Court immunity ruling. Do we know when we'll have a ruling from the judge on that? And does the fact that he was reelected change anything in the immunity argument?
It should not change anything in the immunity argument. I don't think we know exactly when that will come down, but I would think it would come down fairly soon. I think this is rather of a long shot, given the fact that most of the conduct for which he was convicted happened before he assumed the presidency. There are a few pieces of evidence that came in that could potentially have been covered by that immunity decision, but the judge could easily say that there is enough other evidence sufficient to support that conviction. So that is not an important matter that he would have to dismiss the conviction as a result of.
Rebecca Roife, thank you.
Thank you.
Tuesday marks 1,000 days since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The grim milestone comes the same day that Russia says the Ukrainian military fired long-range American-supplied missiles for the first time. The Kremlin has said President Biden's decision to let Ukraine fire deep into Russia risks further escalating the conflict. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams reports from Kyiv.
Russia says that Ukraine fired 6 American-made ATACMS into the Bryansk region in southern Russia today, apparently targeting a military facility. Now, we are still working to confirm those details, but a U.S. official has confirmed to CBS News that the ATACMS, missiles with a maximum range of close to 200 miles, have now been used on Russian territory. This comes just days after the U.S. gave permission for the ATACMS to be used against targets deep inside Russia. Russia says the U.S. is adding fuel to the fire with the move, and in September, Vladimir Putin warned that if the U.S. allowed Ukraine to use ATACMS inside his country, it would mean that America and Russia were at war. Today, Putin approved a change in Russia's nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for a Russian nuclear strike. A U.S. official called that, quote, irresponsible rhetoric. The U.S. decision to allow Ukraine a broader use of the ATACMS came after more than 10,000 North Korean troops were deployed to Russia, bolstering Moscow's forces. Today, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that number could grow to 100,000 North Korean soldiers. Today also marks 1,000 days of war here in Ukraine, 1,000 days since Vladimir Putin sent his tanks, troops and warplanes across the border. The military death toll alone in this country is thought to be around 70,000. Back to you.
Holly Williams, thank you. Still to come, freedom of the press is a constitutional right, but given recent comments from President-elect Trump, what could that right look like under the incoming administration? We'll take a look at his comments, past and present. Plus, SpaceX successfully launches its Starship for a 6th time. The details on what makes this spacecraft stand out. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy. It's gonna be a ride.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
How fast do you think you were going? 195 miles an hour. This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes. Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Forensic investigators and authorities responding to the murder of Laken Riley took the stand in Georgia Tuesday, detailing what led to their conclusion that Jose Ibarra was responsible. CBS's Manuel Bojorquez has the latest from the trial in Athens.
After the prosecution rested their case this afternoon, it was the defense's turn, and before they got going, the judge asked the defendant in this case, Jose Ibarra, whether he wanted to take the stand in his own defense, and Ibarra, through a translator, said that he would not be doing that. The defense plans to eventually call his two brothers to the stand. But in laying out the final part of their case, the prosecution started the day with a reading of text messages on Laken Riley's cell phone, and that became an emotional part of the day because the last message she sent was to her mother. It said, "Good morning, about to go for a run if you're free to talk," and her mother could be heard crying in the courtroom when those messages were read. The prosecution ended with a DNA expert from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation who said that indeed the samples of DNA found under Laken Riley's fingernails belong to Jose Ibarra. The prosecution says that's proof that there was a struggle and that he is the killer, but the defense is trying to poke holes in the methodology used to do that testing. Back to you.
Manuel Bojorquez, thank you. SpaceX's Super Heavy Starship rocket splashed down in the Indian Ocean Tuesday after its 6th test flight.
3, 2, 1.
President-elect Donald Trump attended the launch with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. The rocket is part of NASA's Artemis program, which hopes to have astronauts return to the moon as soon as 2026. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Jason Allen, who is near the launch site in South Padre Island, Texas. Jason, this, as we mentioned, is the Starship's 6th test flight. What makes this different from previous tests?
Lindsay, every single one of these tests is a little step, an advancement toward eventually being the vehicle that carries people up into space. One of the big things they wanted to test today is, you remember that dramatic catch that we saw just a month ago, and you can see the tower back here behind me. Notably, the booster, the Super Heavy, is not there. It wasn't able to return this time. SpaceX kind of set people up for that, telling us in advance that only if conditions were perfect would they again try to return the Super Heavy booster back to the launch stand. But the rest of the flight, and that booster landed out in the ocean, the rest of the flight appeared to proceed really with flying colors, with the vehicle getting up into space. They wanted to test its ability to actually fire one of the engines while it was in space. It did that. And they wanted to stress it, come down at a high angle to land in the Indian Ocean, and see it do that during daylight hours. All of those things accomplished here in the last about 15 minutes or so.
So what makes this the world's most powerful rocket? I mean, how does it work?
It is massive in size and scope. Even from where we are across the water, it is impressive to see just how tall it is. You're looking at a booster and a vehicle on top of it that are 400 feet tall. So that's double what we saw with the space shuttle back in the day. The booster itself weighs as much as 14 or 15 fully loaded 747s. It is immense in size, and the actual vehicle can carry as many as 100 people. That's important because, as founder Elon Musk has talked about, if you wanted to do something like put people on Mars, you'd want to be able to carry as many people as possible. You need an incredibly large vehicle in order to do that. Nobody has been on board yet, but it did carry its first payload today, Lindsay. It was a banana, a stuffed banana, a play on the old meme of here's a banana for size or for scale. So they had a banana in there today as their first payload.
So you kind of touched on it, but what are the end goals of this?
End goal, Lindsay, is, again, to create something that can carry us back to the moon and then eventually to Mars. Every single one of these tests is a step toward getting there. What they need to be able to demonstrate is that they can do this repetitively, that they can get the vehicle up in the air, that they can land the booster again, that they can refuel it quickly, something they wanted to try to do today, but they weren't able to, and then get it back up to refuel a vehicle that's already there. Exactly how long that's going to take, we don't know, but SpaceX has talked about potentially seeing as many as 400 launches in a year, maybe even by the end of President Trump's second term.
Wow, Jason Allen, thank you so much. President-elect Donald Trump told Fox News Digital on Monday that, or rather, you know what, we're going to have that story in a few minutes. We do want to tell you, though, okay, so we do have this story. I want to go ahead and tell you about Trump and the media. The president-elect told Fox News Digital on Monday that it is, quote, vital to have a free and fair open media or press, but added if he's not, quote, treated fairly, however, that will end. For years, Trump has attacked the media and journalists, referring to the press as fake news and the enemy of the people.
Can we ask you some more questions then, sir?
It doesn't bother me at all, but, I like real news, not fake news. You're fake news. It's election interference fraud, and 60 Minutes should be taken off the air. They should. And CBS should lose its license. That's a lot of fake news back there. Some are actually good, and some are just absolutely terrible. And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news, and I don't mind that so much.
Earlier this year, the president-elect also filed a lawsuit against ABC News and against CBS News just last month over the 60 Minutes interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. For more, I want to bring in David Folkenflik. He's a media correspondent at NPR. David, thank you for being here. Is the president-elect changing his tone, his level of access to the media? And if so, should we believe him?
I would say he's striking what is for him a slightly conciliatory tone, given the vitriol he's unleashed on the campaign trail. And I think the proof will be in the pudding, but I think he's already sketched out what to expect. He's said essentially he would give access as long as he felt the coverage was fair. Now, his definition of fair might be a little different than yours and mine, and might be different than most presidents, many of whom may have had thin skin, but understood that some negative or critical coverage was par for the course in getting the top job in the country and as so-called leader of the free world. So I think essentially he's saying, all right, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones if you're nice to me up front, and then I'm going to assess you as your coverage unfolds. Given the kinds of appointments he's made, given the kinds of rhetoric embraced not only by himself, but by those around him and those he said he wants to appoint to high office, I don't think that we should expect a new kumbaya era to be unfolding in this second version of the Trump White House.
I want to talk about one of those appointments in a minute, but if after that assessment he deems the coverage is unfair, what threat does Trump pose to the media and First Amendment rights? As president, can he punish journalists and the press?
Well, there are ways you can do it large and small, ways you can do it formal and informal. I mean, the easiest way to do it in a small route is to, toss a reporter for a given network or news outlet out of the press room. He could decide, as some of his advisors have suggested, essentially eliminating the White House press area inside the grounds of the White House, eliminate that kind of access. He could stop putting out public information on demand for news organizations to draw upon in their reporting. He's also suggested over time a series of acts that would seem to constrain, if not throttle, what we can have considered to be free press in this country. Let me give you your viewers a couple of examples. One would be, for example, he's called for the loosening of libel laws that would make it a lot easier for people suing news organizations like yours, like mine, and others to prevail. And that, to essentially erode some of the protections that have built up over time on case law. And it's worth noting that at least 3 of the justices in a couple of different ways have suggested they are opening to revisiting, to thinking that this landmark case called New York Times v. Sullivan is flawed in the way in which the decision was reached. He said that he wanted to take away the licenses of broadcast networks, including ABC, NBC, CBS, your own, which is essentially to say the 3 big legacy old traditional broadcast networks. Now, of course, you and I both know those networks aren't themselves given licenses by the federal government, but their local stations are, because they are using public airwaves to broadcast their signal conventionally over the air. Well, there are 80 such stations owned, among them, the 3 networks own 80 stations. So, those are profit centers and therefore pressure points that the new administration could use to try to influence or force certain changes in how coverage works. And also you've got other business interests that come before federal regulators like the Federal Communications Commission, the Department of Justice, or the Federal Trade Commission, as certain kinds of deals are approved involving these media companies or involving their owners' other interests. If you consider Elon Musk, who owns Twitter, he also owns, SpaceX. So he has business in front of the government. He's an ally of the president. Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, is an individual person, also the executive chairman, founder of Amazon. They have a ton of business before the federal government with interests, in the billions of dollars. Some of it in terms of contracts that they're paid for. Some of it in terms of, in the case of the Amazon shipping business, billions of dollars worth of shipping every year, right? So through the U.S. Postal Service. So there's a bunch of different ways in which there are pressure points, whether through haranguing, harassment, or overt efforts to interfere with their business operations, that federal regulators and federal officials could have were they to want to pursue partisan or political agendas through the regulation of the media.
And Trump has tapped current FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr to be the agency's chairman. Carr also wrote the Project 2025 chapter on the FCC. What do we know about him, and what do you make of this choice?
Well, first off, I'm told by Republicans and Democrats alike, this guy is smart, this guy is eminently qualified, and he's quite likable, that people, they find him a collegial figure to get on with. He was described to me as, until recently, a relatively conventional Republican with a deregulatory agenda, which is to say that he wanted to strip away certain kinds of regulations that prevented, for example, greater consolidation of ownership. He argued in the digital era to constrain, old-fashioned media outlets from being able to combine their forces or merge, seemed out of date with the times. But in recent years, he's adopted, certain stances that seem to echo strongly Trumpian themes that seem to me to be kind of highly regulatory. He was a strong backer of Congress, which had bipartisan support in doing this, but enforcing the sale of TikTok in the U.S. From its Chinese owners. Trump originally strongly embraced that. Of late, he has backed away from it. And it's unclear what's going to happen once he takes office, given that that was passed into law. But similarly, Carr has called for a strong look at how broadcast networks operate, because he's pointed out that their licenses of their local stations are to operate in the public good. And he said quite explicitly the points at which that they have business that come before the commission are moments at which they can pressure the networks to be more considerate of the administration's concerns. He would argue on behalf of the public. And similarly, he sent out letters to a number of social media and big tech companies, Apple and Google and Meta, Facebook and Microsoft, saying, they're part of a censorship cartel. Now, notably not among it is X, or Twitter, which is controlled by the president-elect's ally, Elon Musk. But nonetheless, he's arguing that they have been throttling conservative speech, and essentially that only is Musk, uncorking that free speech. But there are those who argue that actually he's trying to enforce a kind of government-mandated sympathy or amplification of conservative figures and conservative talking points. And so this deregulatory figure seems to be awfully interested in the inner workings of speech, some of which it's not clear currently anyway fall under the FCC's portfolio or powers at all.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground, much more ground to cover soon. David Folkenflik, please come back. Thank you.
You bet.
The CDC is monitoring several viruses that are breaking out throughout the U.S. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder joins us after the break to discuss how these outbreaks are occurring and best ways to stay safe. You're streaming The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. Ukraine says it's still working to reduce its CO2 emissions, even as it continues to fight off the Russian invasion. The Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Energy spoke at the United Nations Annual Climate Summit Tuesday, saying the country needs to build a more decentralized and resilient energy system. This year, Russian missiles have knocked out about half of Ukraine's power generation. Former One Direction star Liam Payne will reportedly be laid to rest Wednesday. According to several British newspapers, the late singer's former bandmates are set to attend the funeral. Payne died in October at the age of 31 after falling from a hotel balcony in Argentina. Prosecutors have charged 3 people in connection with his death. Google is criticizing a Bloomberg report that claims the U.S. Justice Department will propose a measure forcing the tech giant to sell its Chrome browser. In a statement, Google said the DOJ is pushing a radical agenda and a sale would hurt consumers and businesses. The DOJ has not yet commented on the report. Cases of dangerous bacterial infections and viruses have been growing throughout the United States. An E. coli outbreak linked to organic carrots from California-based Grimway Farms has infected at least 39 people across 18 states. 15 of those infected have been hospitalized and at least one person has died. Dr. Celine Gounder joins us now. She's a CBS News medical contributor and editor-at-large for public health at KFF Health News. Doctor, let's start with this E. coli outbreak. I mean, it really seems like every month we're talking about a new one. How concerning is this? It appears to be happening so frequently now.
I think we do need to take this with a grain of salt. Our tests for foodborne illnesses have gotten better. We know that during the pandemic, there was really all of these things ground to a halt because we were so focused on COVID. And also cases of foodborne illness were probably lost in the shuffle in the mix of so many people having COVID. So I would be a little cautious in over-interpreting that data. But at the same time, because we have such a diffuse supply chain for our foods, they're processed, they go through different steps of processing in different places. There are many moments where you could have an introduction of bacteria, other contaminants, and I think that's why we're seeing an increase.
Lots of points of contact. There has been a surge in whooping cough cases in the U.S., particularly in the Pacific Northwest. Why is this happening, and how can we stay safe?
We are seeing an increase in non-medical exemptions from vaccinations. In other words, people saying, well, I just don't believe in vaccines, or for religious reasons, I don't want to get vaccinated. And as a result, we have seen a decrease in vaccination rates. That's one important factor. The other, in particular, with whooping cough, pertussis, is that a less side effect causing vaccine was introduced in the mid-90s. That vaccine also has more waning of immunity. So you had a trade-off, more waning of immunity, fewer side effects. But that's also why we see a bit of an uptick as well.
We're ticking a lot of things right now, so I'm going to move on to the next. CBS News has been tracking bird flu cases in the United States. California has identified a child who has been infected with the virus. How concerning is this?
Well, we don't know how the child was infected, so that in and of itself is concerning. If this was acquired from another human, another person, that would be very concerning because it means that we may have seen human-to-human transmission. And that's what's potentially a signal or red flag that we could be moving towards what could be a pandemic virus. And I say could, may, because there are other factors we don't have time to get into now, but that's why that's of concern.
One more, we've got Mpox. It's been detected, a new strain detected in the U.S. This strain appears to be more severe than the one that spread in 2022. I remember this. It was a big deal in New York City, at least. How concerned should the public be about this, and what are some prevention methods?
So we are concerned. There's been an outbreak of this in the DRC and in Kinshasa and elsewhere in Africa. We have been really monitoring to see when, not if, this was going to arrive here. There is a 2-dose vaccine called Jynneos, which can be given for Mpox. Unfortunately, less than a third of men who have sex with men who are especially high risk for this have been vaccinated. And so if you are in that high risk group, now is the time to get your 2 doses.
President-elect Donald Trump is selecting former TV personality Dr. Oz to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. What is your reaction to this planned nomination?
Well, I think many of us who are in medicine and scientists, public health are concerned because Dr. Oz does have a history of spreading mis and disinformation. For example, early in the COVID pandemic, touting the supposed benefits of hydroxychloroquine, which was debunked, disproven, and in fact has very real harms when given in inappropriate situations. So it is concerning that, one, he has spread disinformation for many years on his show, was in fact brought before Congress to testify as to why he was doing this, and he was also pairing this with selling various kinds of supplements, snake oils, et cetera, for which there was no data. So it is concerning to see somebody like that heading one of the top U.S. health agencies.
Okay, well, Dr. Celine Gounder, we appreciate you covering all of those different topics with us. Thanks for being here. 2 UN agencies say Palestinian gangs who are rivals of Hamas violently looted nearly 100 aid trucks last week after entering Gaza. The trucks have been carrying food provided by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, and the World Food Program. The UN says nearly 2 million Gazans are facing extreme hunger. State Department spokesperson Matt Miller said Tuesday the U.S. has been working with the Israeli Defense Forces to prevent the looting from happening again.
What we have seen is a breakdown in the security situation inside of Gaza. At our request, the IDF opened new routes to deliver humanitarian assistance. And we're hopeful that some of those new routes will help divert convoys away from looters. But this has been a problem that's been ongoing for some time.
This all comes as Lebanon and Hezbollah accept a U.S. ceasefire proposal. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer has more from Tel Aviv. Liz?
The ceasefire talks in Lebanon are underway, and today the U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein said that they were constructive, but that doesn't mean that a signed deal is imminent. Meanwhile, both sides are pushing it militarily. Hezbollah said it fired rockets at a military base very close to Tel Aviv today. There was a missile over the weekend that landed in central Israel and hurt 5 civilians, and there is rocket fire every day. Meanwhile, Israel is still targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. In fact, today there was a strike on a building in central Beirut, very close to the parliament. 5 people were killed in that. It's pretty clear that both sides want to get themselves into as advantageous a position as possible before the ceasefire actually stops the fighting. So for the moment, it's dangerous, it's loud, and there is no formal end in sight. Back to you.
Liz Palmer in Tel Aviv, thank you. President Biden urged world leaders to keep going on the progress made during his 4 years in office to address climate change. On his last day at the G20 summit in Brazil, Biden spoke about the climate accomplishments of his administration, including a newly announced $325 million investment to help developing countries move away from fossil fuels.
When it comes to the adoption of clean energy, we've made remarkable progress together, but we all know we have so much more to do. We all know what it takes. History is watching us.
Many of Biden's climate accomplishments and investments have come from the Inflation Reduction Act, which President-elect Donald Trump has promised to significantly roll back spending on. California Governor Gavin Newsom says he is delaying his clemency decision in the Menendez brothers case. Last month, the Los Angeles County District Attorney asked a judge to re-sentence Lyle and Eric Menendez, who were convicted of murdering their parents in 1989. Citing new evidence that supports the brothers' claims of abuse. The DA had also expressed support of the brothers' bid for clemency, which would be granted by Newsom. After the DA lost his re-election bid earlier this month, Newsom says he will wait to make a decision until the incoming district attorney is able to review the case himself. The Pentagon is working to address one of its most troubling issues, suicides among active duty troops. Coming up, I'll speak with the head of a nonprofit supporting special operation forces about how big the problem is and what can be done to address it. You're streaming The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Can see clearly now.
Clearly, CBS Mornings.
Weekdays on CBS.
Yeah!
Tony, coming?
No, I'm gonna stick around for an hour.
Hey! CBS Mornings Plus with Adriana Diaz and Tony DeCopel, right after CBS Mornings.
It's just like mornings.
Plus fun.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day.
These 7 miles of tunnels were the secret storage site for fuel for the Navy's Pacific Fleet in planes.
So this is one of the tanks.
Oh my gosh.
What happened 20 stories below ground is a story for 60 Minutes.
This thing that was a lifeline for the fleet is a threat.
That's right.
I'm Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours, and of all the cases I've covered, this is the one that troubles me most. Listen to Murder in the Orange Grove, the troubled case against Crosley Green, wherever you get your podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Sunday morning, a visit with the Wayans at Papa's house, plus affairs of state with the diplomat, and in praise of pigeons. Listen for the trumpet.
Sources tell CBS News that President-elect Trump is expected to nominate Linda McMahon to serve as Secretary of the Department of Education. McMahon is Trump's transition co-chair, was part of his last administration, serving as small business administrator. McMahon is the co-founder and former CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment and unsuccessfully ran for Connecticut Senate in 2010 and 2012. 2.5 years after the Pentagon launched a formal review of suicides in the military, we've learned the number of active duty service members taking their own lives has gone up in that time. A report out this month found there were 363 suicides among active duty service members last year. That's up from 331 suicides in 2022. A Pentagon spokesperson last week acknowledged more work needs to be done.
We owe it to our service members and our military families to provide the best possible care, to identify risk factors and spot warning signs, and to eliminate stigmas around seeking help. And when it comes to suicide, one loss to suicide is one too many.
Josh McCain joins me now. He's the founder and CEO of Big Sky Bravery, a nonprofit focused on supporting active duty special operations forces. First of all, Josh, thank you for being here. What is your reaction when you hear those numbers and see the problem is not only not going away, it's getting worse?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who truly cares about this country would consider it heartbreaking. You know, I just want to say, first off, thanks for highlighting such an important issue. It's near and dear to my heart. The data, it's devastating for those who sacrifice everything for us and then, you know, face a war when they get home. So, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And the report also says enlisted men under the age of 30 accounted for 61% of active duty military suicides in 2023. What have you heard from some of the service members you work with about why this is happening in this particular demographic?
Yeah, look, Lindsay, we got a mental health crisis in this country. You know, suicide is the number one leading cause of death for ages 14 to 15 and second for ages 15 to 19. Some alarming statistics about what you said about, you know, the age of 30 for the service members is that deployed veterans actually have a 41% higher suicide risk compared to the general population.
Wow.
Veterans, it's terrible. Veterans have a 57% higher risk of suicide than those who haven't served like me. I mean, the data behind it suggests that we need to do more as Americans in addressing this issue. When I started Big Sky Bravery back in 2015, I did it in honor of my brother-in-law, who was literally returning from his 14th deployment in special operations since 2001. I was living in New York. I was trying to find charities to donate to get him some help. And throughout my few weeks of research, I couldn't find a single resource for active duty military, especially those in special operations. What I saw was what I consider a time for change, which is everything that we have and that everything that we still currently have outside of what we do in a couple other organizations is reactive. And numbers are showing that reactive is not working. We need to be proactive as Americans and figure out new solutions and new strategies for this very exceptional community of warfighters. And that's what we're doing here at Big Sky Bravery.
So from your experience working with active duty service members in special ops, what has been successful in terms of proactive steps?
You know, for our population, particularly, it's really getting to the root problems of what they're facing. It's focusing on, you know, who these men and women were before their time in the military, and more importantly, what's life going to look like after the military. these individuals simply want to be heard. They want to be loved. They want to be cared for. They want to be made a priority. And that's the least as Americans we can do. So what we do is we set up very private conversations, and we pair these high-performing service members with high-performing civilians for their week that they're here. And everything that we learn about these individuals, we don't report back to their command. Another unique thing is that every person who comes out for our programs, they're hand-selected internally to come out here. So that means for us, whenever they get off the airplane, there's a reason why they're here, and it's up to us to figure out what that problem is, moving forward. One of the solutions is creating a safe place where they can be vulnerable, and they know that there's a tribe outside of the military that's going to be with them after they get done with their time in service. Another thing to think about is when these individuals are serving our country at the most elite levels, when they come back home and they're being vulnerable with someone they have to talk to and do a brief with, they might disclose some information where they could potentially lose their clearance or their job. I mean, how does that foster a safe environment for these individuals to unload? And I'm not knocking on the government, okay? I'm not saying that what they're doing is wrong. What I'm saying is that Americans need to step up and be proactive on all the problems that we face with the statistics that I mentioned, with the teens, with the service members. Like I said, when I started Big Sky Bravery in 2015, there was 45,000 charities with an operating budget. Now there's over 60,000 that receive almost $2.5 billion in funding, and the suicide rate has gotten worse. It doesn't mean that those charities aren't doing good work. It just means that we need to be very resourceful with how we're giving back to these individuals. And for us, that's being proactive and hitting these problems head on, rather than waiting until they get out of the military, because that approach doesn't seem to be working.
I got less than a minute with you. I don't know if you can answer it in that time, but is there one thing the Pentagon should be doing?
I think it's a very controversial question. I appreciate you asking it. Our country's so divided right now. Politics are beyond polarizing. I think both sides would have different opinions. For me, the individuals that we give back to, their focus is war. All right, what they're doing is heroic, but there's an evil side to it as well, right? I mean, I can't imagine the theaters that these individuals deploy to, but not only what their families are going through when they're over there. To me, I think the Pentagon, they're allocating $250 million in suicide prevention. It looks like next year in fiscal year 2025, their entire budget is $824 billion. Do the math on that. It's a pretty low percentage.
Josh McCain, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for having me and highlighting this issue.
If you or someone you know needs help, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline Network is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call, text, or chat the hotline using the 3-digit number 988. We're going to take a quick break. More news ahead. You're watching The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
but with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Arthur Frommer, who encouraged Americans to travel on a budget, has died at the age of 95. According to his family, he died Monday from complications of pneumonia. Frommer is best known for his guidebook titled Europe on $5 a Day, which he self-published in 1957. He urged travelers to avoid the expensive hotels and embrace family-run inns, local coffee shops, and self-guided tours. Frommer has said he preferred traveling on a budget because it leads to a more authentic experience. The U.S. women's and girls soccer just received a massive boost, a donation of $30 million. The money from businesswoman and soccer mogul Michelle Kang will go toward professional development for female soccer players, coaches, and referees. It will also allow U.S. soccer to bring in 100,000 players into its youth program. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Prosecutors weigh in on President-elect Trump's felony sentencing with just 2 months until he returns to the Oval Office. We'll explain the filing and what happens next. Plus, it's been 1,000 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. We'll have a report on the state of the conflict, including a major change in weapons strategy. And it's 3-2-1 liftoff for SpaceX again. What makes Tuesday's Texas launch so remarkable? You're watching CBS News.
CBS Mornings Plus, clearly more news, more smart conversation.
More money-saving tips, more recipes.
More uplifting ways to get you on your way.
Plus, more sports, more weather.
Clearly, more CBS Mornings.
Plus, sunshine.